Hello, Dr. Ron England, and what I'm going to talk about today is defining XML schema definitions. So if you've been watching the videos in this course or you have a little bit of experience with XML, you should have a little bit of understanding of the structure of XML, the way it uses elements and attributes. Now, you can just create an XML file, just like here, that doesn't have any specific definition of its structure. But just like when you're defining things like tables and using SQL and creating a database, XML is actually used to store data, store information in data. And in many cases, you would like to actually define a specific structure for that data. And XML has a way to do that. There's actually two different ways to do that. And I'm going to show you one of the methods that's the most common method used now, which is called the XSD, or the XML schema definition. Now, the beauty of XSD is that it's written in XML. So if you were to look at an XSD, you would see that in this case it looks like XML. And because XML actually is a little bit more has a little bit more capabilities than what you might see in something like SQL and relational table definition. Now, the example I show here simply would define essentially the equivalent of a table, where everything is an element, and those elements have the names, and it matches the XML file that I used in a previous example. But because XML actually has the ability to do both attributes and elements, that you can have attributes associated with elements, the XML schema definition language has that capability too. Now, I'm not going to go into, nor do you need to for the courses that I'm teaching, a full background of how XSD defines and uses and defines how XML works. It's just simply beyond the scope. And there are plenty of good tools that allow you to create XSDs that are graphical in nature, visual in nature, and there's actually plenty of tools that will take XML and determine the XSD behind it. So one methodology of defining the structure of an XML file is the XSD, or XML schema definition. There is a second one called DTD, or document type declaration, and it's an equivalent method for defining the structure of an XML file. And that type of file looks different. I'm not showing an example of it here. There's plenty of examples of it through W3 Schools that you can look at if you need to learn the DTD format. There's also, just like with XSD, there are plenty of tools that allow you to define the structure, and it creates the DTD for you. So, and when you're defining these structures, that is a recommended methodology to do this. Now, since you can define the structure of an XML file and you can create the XML files, that brings about the concept of making sure that an XML file follows the defined structure. So there's two concepts in XML that show that an XML file is actually a usable XML file, that it's valid and that it's well formed. Now, if you're looking at XML, it's very easy to see that concept of XML not being well formed. So for example, if I took this tag, this bot tag here out, and I wanted to validate this XML, well, now I've got an open CD tag without a closed CD tag. And that would not be a good form for the XML, because if you have an open tag, you need to have a closed tag that goes with it. Okay, that's the concept of making sure that your XML is well formed. Another thing is making sure that your XML is valid. Well, to determine whether something's valid, you have to determine valid against what. That's where you have this concept of actually having a structure, defining the structure, and then saying that a piece of XML is going to follow a specific structure. If it follows the structure and follows it correctly, it's valid. So in the cases of looking at XML, the concepts that are presented in this video are that there is a way to define the structure of an XML document through an XSD or a DTD. Okay, once that structure is defined, there's two ways of looking at the XML to make sure that it's actually usable and correct. That is that it's well formed, meaning that the tags actually form or work correctly together, and that it's valid against a definition. That's it. Lots of good materials on the web so you can learn these different techniques and lots of different tools. And I do recommend that you work with tools for doing this. Good luck, good programming. Thanks.